Coming up on this episode of the Roundtable.
Scientists have now confirmed there simply is not a political angle from which Kamala Harris looks like a good candidate. It's you can't do it on sheer fluff. You can't do it on issues. You can't do it on personality. You can't do it on coalition building. You can't even do it by hiding her in the basement like they did with Joe. There is not a way that this looks good. And yeah, that narrative that this was a perfect campaign, it's funny, that really is taking shape. It started early on. In fact, it started before election night. And it's possible that they will maintain that. There's so much other blame to go around, especially to the people they love to claim to speak for, the Latinos, the Black men, the gays, right? All of these demographic groups that have disappointed them. And then ultimately, I think what they will blame is America. I've been saying this for a while. What you're now going to see is a whole bunch of self-described moderate liberals who are actually leftists, who have adopted the official posture of this is a great idea for a country that's never really been put entirely into practice.
Welcome, everyone, once again to the Roundtable, the publishers and editors weekly podcast here at the American Mind at the Claremont Institute. I'm your host, Ryan Williams, president of the Claremont Institute and publisher of the American Mind and the Claremont Review of Books. I'm joined by special election editor, Spencer Clavin, our New York correspondent, Seth Barron, and managing editor, Mike Sabo. Whoo boy, what a night. Mm-hmm. If I sound like I have a cold, it's because I think we went to bed at 3 a.m. Central Time. Just wanted to catch the Trump speech live somewhat, and finally did. I'm calling this, I just submitted a piece to the New York Post. They wanted to know people's predictions for what the Democrats are going to do and where they go from now. And I opened it with, it's got to be the greatest political story arc in at least the last 100 years in American politics. Trump serves out one term, loses under a cloud of suspicion in 2020, fueled by COVID and various voting irregularities, among other things. Spends basically the next 4 years campaigning, sort of, announces in 22, blows out all of his opposition, doesn't even attend any of the debates, treats the whole crowd as the junior varsity team quite effectively, nearly gets assassinated, nearly once, very close once, and then a second attempt at least that we know about. And then after a crazy switch out of the Democratic candidate after Biden's poor debate performance, everyone knows all this. We've been talking about it now for months. The vibe shift is on. Kamala is the candidate of joy. It's going to be a blowout. Trump's forever vanquished to the outer darkness. And now he wins the first, looks to be very likely, the first Republican to win a popular vote majority since George W. Bush 20 years ago now. What are everyone's thoughts?
Well, it's funny because the reaction on the left is total shock, dismay, surprise. They just can't get their heads around how the person that they've been calling a fascist has that nobody listened to them, that they've been screaming fascist for so many years, and somehow that's fallen on deaf ears, and everybody else is wrong. But it's interesting because, it's a real base and superstructure thing. If you take away like all the rhetoric and the verbiage that they've tried to pile on, and you look at the fundamentals, which is what American elections have always kind of, turned on, the economy, crime, the border, foreign policy, it's all been a total disaster. So it really shouldn't have been a surprise that they lost. And I remember saying this in 2016, that the election wasn't won because of Trump's personality. It was won because of his focus on the issues. And he's always been like an issues-based candidate. That's what people refused to understand. Yeah, sure, he's got like his bravura and his own quirky charisma. But if he had run in 2016 just a standard Republican type of candidacy, he wouldn't have gotten anywhere. It was because he talked about the border and, trade and middle class concerns. I mean, he's completely realigned American politics. I will say, yes, he is. And this is something our friend Christopher Caldwell pointed out to me once. Like, it's fair to call him an electoral genius, but it's not clear that he's a political genius in terms of like being a statesman, governing, running things, executing. He makes slip ups and own goals. And let's hope that this time around, 4 years in the wilderness, maybe to have reflected, that he brings a little bit more oomph to the table and smarts in terms of dealing with the opposition.
Well, he's certainly changed. I don't know whether he's changed enough or in the right ways to fix the problems that dogged his first term. But the other part of this, I think, is that the American people have changed. The country has changed. And that's, for me, that's the biggest takeaway, new information. I felt like it was happening. I hoped it was happening. But you don't know, obviously, until the numbers come back. And what seemed true in the weeks leading up to the election, and now seems to be true after the polls or the results are in, is that people got either cowed out of supporting him by the chaos of 2020, or they got fed up with some of his eccentricities and excesses, and they perhaps after that were turned off by the January 6th stuff. And so they opted for the only other option on the table, holding their nose, just as they had with Trump. We were all, obviously none of us were in favor of the Biden administration, but none of the Biden voters were particularly enthusiastic about the Biden administration either. It was very much like, well, I guess this is the best of a really bad set of options in this party that seems to have become completely deranged, totally in hoc to its most radical elements, who believe wackadoodle, cuckoo bananas theories about things that nobody's ever heard of outside of a seminar room, that have no relationship to reality or to any of the basic issues that, Seth, you're talking about. But I guess like that's what we got. That's the other option. So I guess we'll take that. We'll open that door, see what's behind door number 2. And then you open door number 2, and it's like a Hieronymus Bosch painting for 4 years. Everything goes absolutely downhill into the tank. And people were like, yeah, actually, I think we made the right call the last time. Like we sort of, and that is sort of what seems to have happened, is they've taken a good hard look at this evil ideology, this angry, small, petty, tribalist, anti-American set of propositions. They've seen the effects it has on, the world stage, on the geopolitical situation, on the grocery and the gas pump and all these bread and butter issues. They were confronted with the hard and bitter reality of what the trans maximalists actually want. They mean what they say. I think a lot of people that we know did yeoman's work making that clear. And they just were like, absolutely not. Like, they sort of were on the fence about it. They saw what it was like and they said, hell no. And it's like every demographic ever moved to the right. There are demographics I didn't even know existed in the country that moved to the right. It's like, speakers of Tagalog have shifted 5 points in a redward direction. I mean, there's a few small demographics. Maybe we can get into, as they say, the crosstabs and parsing some of this stuff. But basically, red wave doesn't even start to cover it. And I think Trump is the imperfect figurehead of that. He really was the only guy who could accurately represent those people, that like what they basically think, where Americans are basically at. It's not necessarily where each of us is at individually, but he basically stands for the stuff that people broadly seem to stand for. And I would be lying if I didn't say it makes me giddy with delight. I love it. I want to shoot it into my veins. I want to inhale it. I haven't even brought an energy drink to this podcast, even though I've had about 4 hours sleep since Ryan. I also waited for Trump to speak.
And you're an hour behind me.
Exactly. I'm running on pure schadenfreude, and more than that, pure joy, I would say.
So I, too, waited for Trump to speak. Actually just brought my second son home. He was in the NICU for over a month. So had him on my lap, was watching Trump. And yeah, it was an amazing thing. I mean, I think we shouldn't let, what happened overshadow specifics of polls and that kind of thing. I mean, this is a huge, huge deal, arguably even more shocking and surprising than 2016 with everything the regime threw at him, Russia collusion, indictments, just nonstop stuff. And he came out strong on the other side, and he came out in a position of advantage. I think going in, he knows now what he needs to do for DC. He knows the kind of people that he actually needs to get into these positions. I just saw Thomas Massie. It looks like he's going to be the Secretary of Agriculture. So that right away, I mean, that's kind of shocking. Can't wait for some of what the other positions are going to be. I mean, is Massey going to like tear out all the electricity at the Department of Agriculture and put in handmade generators? We'll see. But this is a monumental thing. I think what happened in 2016 was the beginning of the realignment. This is really the next stage of it. Like Spencer, you talked about in the crosstabs. I mean, all these different groups have kind of shifted over. Black men, I think, voted for Trump, I think 20%.
It's because they're white supremacists, though. That doesn't count.
Clearly, they just hate themselves. It's, the Clarence Thomas syndrome, obviously. I mean, that's the only explanation, right? So it's just amazing looking at the crosstabs, looking at what happened, seeing the media reaction, which honestly, I was flipping through, MSNBC and a couple other stations, CNN. It was a little more muted. I really wanted some, real meltdowns, but I didn't see a lot of that. So, which kind of indicates, are they kind of keeping their powder dry for later? What is exactly happening? It'll be interesting to kind of see. It'll be interesting to see too if there's like a similar, Time Magazine massive expose and see all the constellation of Soros money and et cetera that was trying to get it at it. You obviously saw Soros money in a big way in Florida, and DeSantis absolutely was critical and pivotal in stopping that. You had amendments 4 and 3 get voted down, so that was key. Is this the right actually having some kind of power, having a real presence now in a way that they didn't? And I think it could really signal that. So again, all signs are good. It's good to be happy about this. You're not making politics an idol if you're happy about this. And it's kind of all systems go and on to the next moves about who staffs the Trump administration and what does he do, especially in his first 100 days, especially in his first day. He has to get off to a big start. So I think that's the focus going forward.
I wonder if they want to get Massey out of Congress, like so he can stop talking about Israel and Ukraine and whatnot.
Could be.
Far and away, the best part of his victory speech was the lengthy digression about Robert Kennedy, where he says he's going to make America healthy again. But I said to him, Bobby, don't touch our liquid gold. He doesn't like the oil. We've got more oil in this country than any other place in the world. I said, you keep your hands off the liquid gold, Bobby. It's so good.
It's like Trump turning into, Goldfinger, it's just crazy. It's like, wow, okay.
It was an unprecedented victory speech in a way too, because it was like a mini State of the Union almost. With instead of the call outs being up to the audience, it's like, oh, Bryson DeChambeau, why don't you come on up here? And like Bryson clearly was not prepared for that. Susie Wiles, you want to say a few words? Clearly, she did not want to say anything.
Absolutely not.
No
terror past the microphone.
And then the guys who know Trump well and how he operates, Dana White and JD Vance, were very disciplined in speaking for not more than like 40 seconds. And then of course, as Amelia said right before we went to bed, once it was over, she's like, my God, Barron Trump is tall, because he's like 3 inches taller than everyone on stage.
One thing about this that I think is really salutary, and I just think it's so important, is that it's clear, and this really, New York was really, in many ways, the focus of this attack on Trump by lawyers, like through lawfare, and like coming up with these absurd lawsuits, these ridiculous charges, changing the law in New York State so he could be sued for like this bogus, semi-bogus sexual assault claim. All of that, the 34 felony charges, trying to bankrupt him with billion-dollar fines. And this was clearly thought to be like a slam dunk by the left. Like this was going to totally destroy him politically. And the fact that it had exactly the opposite effect, And that not only did people ignore it, but they sympathized with him, obviously. Every time they attacked him, his poll numbers went up and he kind of gained in stature, but it's just remarkable to me that the American people, like, they said, no, I mean, we're not like a third world country. We don't want like Peruvian style, Brazilian style politics where you jail your political opponents. I mean, it's funny. I put on Twitter, I said, I wonder if Tish James and Alvin Bragg and Fonnie Wills understand that they helped put Trump back in the White House. And someone said, oh, okay. When in doubt, blame the black people. And I said, no, I'm not blaming them. I'm thanking them.
The African Americans have made great contributions to the history of this nation, and this is only the latest in a long line of them. I mean, are you saying, Seth, that what we really needed was somebody to subject himself to the scorn and persecution and abuse of the world and thereby to overcome the world?
We've talked about this before.
You always go there.
There are these like elements to Trump where he is kind of the chosen victim. Like he is the scapegoat. He's like, I don't know did any of you catch Steve Bannon's like rant today or last night? Oh my God. He's just saying like, look, these people, okay, we're not going to say that they deserve vengeance, but they deserve justice. And Trump is a merciful person. Trump is good-hearted, but we're not. And he was just saying, like, we have to go after these people. We have to, essentially disassemble the deep state and, paw through the rubble and do an autopsy on what exactly they did in 2020 and all the people they punished and put in prison and clean house. Look, it would be great if this time around we can actually do it.
Well, a major new addition to the team that makes that more of a likelihood is Elon Musk. This is one of Elon's big things. He's a major, as Trump said, a star is born. I love Trump's idea that he birthed Elon Musk's star, the richest man in the world. It's like, thanks to me, he's very famous.
No one knew his name before Trump.
Right. He's like going to literally make us an interplanetary. but this is important, and it's the persecutions, the lawfare part of it is one example of a broader trend, which is just how many really dangerous instincts and institutions on the left Trump has thoroughly discredited. I mean, the strength of this victory is also a repudiation of, I think, the racialism, the 1619 Project stuff, the trans stuff, the lawfare, I mean, all of these things, and most importantly, perhaps the legacy media, which is another Elon thing. You've pointed out often that Elon made it possible to have a genuine alternative, as we did not have in October of 2020. There was actually somewhere you could go to if ABC wasn't talking about stuff, if none of the other outlets like Twitter was kind of a safe space for facts. And I watched them on CNN talking about how Kamala didn't do better, did not outperform Joe Biden in a single county, not one county. And they're like, they're sort of totally stunned that nobody listened to them. But I mean, this is the first time, and we've been waiting for this whole time. Nobody's listening. And I'm sure they'll continue to mount their resistance, but I genuinely think that is probably one of the greatest consequences. And it is because they shot their wad. They threw everything they had at him, and it just was so obviously overkill and so ridiculous that it's now discredited.
Yeah, I don't know if they have kind of a tactical nuke in their back pocket, but I mean, that's about it. He's evaded absolutely everything. And it again, it's just kind of amazing to see this. It was Brian Stelter. He said something about what you just said about they aren't listening. There was some, random ad executive he was talking to, a media executive, and he said, well, they're just not listening. And these guys, obviously they both thought this was a massive issue. And I'm like, great. Yes, they're not listening anymore to the propaganda stream. It is cut. The authorities are gone. The high tables are gone. This is a great thing. And this is what needed to happen. Trump needed to shame his opponents, but he needed to take their authority away too. So this is just a next step and a really, really important step in order to do that. He's kind of like Reagan in a way. Reagan was called, kind of Teflon. I mean, everything kind of bounced off of him. And Trump is the exact same way. And his enemies are just still confounded at dealing with him. They just fundamentally do not understand what's fueling him, and they do not understand how to defeat him ultimately. He came back, obviously, this time. He's going to have a term. JD Vance, I'm sure, is going to be running in 2028. I think probably, I don't know who the Democrats have up their sleeve at that time. Kamala, I'm sure they are not probably going to run her again. She's heavily disliked, obviously, in the Democrat, that party. You just look at her performance in the primaries. So they're in trouble, but this is just kind of the next step for just the political realignment that we're going through.
The thing is, in 2016, I remember thinking, okay, well, now he won, and now we can get, he can start implementing his agenda, and the other side will kind of come around and just see that, all right, they lost. But then, I was completely wrong. And I think a lot of us were wrong, that they had all of these plans in effect to hamper him, try to put him in prison, destroy him, destroy the entire movement. I don't know. I don't want to be too complacent. I think they've been wrong-footed and they don't really know what to do right now. But do you guys really think that the left is just kind of like accept their defeat?
No way. No way.
I am looking at this question from a sort of high-low coalition perspective. To me, it's a question of whether both sides of that coalition are really both still in it. Is their heart in it? Is it? I know that Mika Brzezinski and Nicole Hannah-Jones and whoever else are all in on learning absolutely nothing from this result. I don't even think there will be what we've all forgotten happened in 2016, which was about a split second of Planck time, like the smallest observable space of time when the left actually turned inward and said, what can we learn? What have we gotten wrong so grievously about this? I don't even think there will really be a meaningful space for them to do that. They will just go all in on the resistance. What I'm not sure about is whether they have the proletarian sheep that they rely upon to make that an actual sort of force in the country more generally. Because it does, like, the bully pulpit, the press, all of that, it only actually matters if you have people with glazed-eyed staring at MSNBC and nodding along. And there are some of those people, but then also there may be fewer of them. I don't know. This is my white pill take, is that, like, they won't go quietly, but they may have been broken coalitionally in a way that they weren't by the first one of these. I don't know.
That New York Post piece I wrote, I kind of, the recriminations will be running about why they lost, and they'll blame Biden, the garbage comment and his we've discussed it, but his persistent knack in the last month of stepping on all of her narrative lines at sort of opportune moments, not for Biden, but for Trump, but maybe for Biden as well. Amelia loves the America This Week podcast with Matt Taibbi and Walter Kern, partly because Kern is just hilarious sometimes. And Kern told Taibbi, he's like, did you see what Jill Biden was wearing when she went to vote? And Matt's like, no, I hadn't seen that. He said she was wearing a brilliant red dress. And and Matt said, oh, that's interesting. And Kern goes, it's from this excellent Japanese designer called a you dresses. Yeah, I mean, Harris will be blamed or not. I think it'll be a mix. Whoopi Goldberg this morning on The View said, actually, Harris did great. She only had 3 months. She really did all she could. This narrative is coming out of the mainstream media too, that Harris ran a conventional, very effective, focused campaign, a traditional campaign. And it's, I mean, I guess it's just a testament to what you're talking about, Spencer, which is the disjunction between the mainstream media's understanding of the perception of the American public and the actual reality in front of them. Because from, I think, normal people's perspective, especially those of us who watched it pretty closely, Harris ran a very unconventional campaign. I mean, it was kind of atmospheric. It was low on substance. She ducked the media for 6 weeks. When she did appear on media, it was kind of a disaster. And she had $1 billion. So the conventional part about it, in an unconventional way, was how much money they had to spend. And yet she rode the wave of enthusiasm for 2 weeks, maybe, and then just settled back down to where Biden was right before the debate or even midway through the debate. It's remarkable. I guess that speaks to the fundamentals, which Seth talked about, which is that the Harris campaign was always the underdog because they were the incumbent, and they tried to overcome that by running as the challenger. That didn't work. And so you would expect a Trump victory. I think what's a little surprising about it is, given his persistent, what seemed to be his persistent polling ceiling through the last entire 6.5 years or longer. No, I mean 8 years almost in his presidency, and then through the really up until the last 6 weeks or maybe 2-3 months, he broke through it finally in the face of, as Seth said, the most remarkable and relentless campaign to destroy him through lawfare, bad press, and sort of calumny and lies that any president has faced in our lifetimes, if not probably ever, certainly in the mass media era. It's sort of an amazing thing.
Yeah, I would describe, if I had to sum up the way that the Democrats approached this Kamala campaign, it would be, she has to have a good side, right? And they just kept, it's like, there's got to be a way you can slice this, that this is an appealing candidate. And we have the entire apparatus of smoke and mirrors that you guys are alluding to like to hold her up to the light at every possible angle. And they're simply, like, scientists have now confirmed, there simply is not a political angle from which Kamala Harris looks like a good candidate. It's you can't do it on sheer fluff. You can't do it on issues. You can't do it on personality. You can't do it on coalition building. You can't even do it by hiding her in the basement like they did with Joe. There is not a way that this looks good. And yeah, that narrative that this was a perfect campaign, it's funny, that really is taking shape. It started early on. In fact, it started before election night. And it's possible that they will maintain that. There's so much other blame to go around, especially to the people they love to claim to speak for, the Latinos, the Black men, the gays, right? All of these demographic groups that have disappointed them. And then ultimately, I think what they will blame is America. I've been saying this for a while. What you're now going to see is a whole bunch of self-described moderate liberals who are actually leftists, who have adopted the official posture of, this is a great idea for a country that's never really been put entirely into practice. I love our founding principles. I love our founding history. I mean, I'm thinking of like somebody like John Dickerson or some of these like lefties who will say, yeah, well, of course, the country has fallen grievously short, but this is a great country. I'm a patriot. And it's because I'm a patriot that I criticize so harshly what I take to be shortcomings in my country. I think you are now going to see a whole bunch of those guys just go full bore on what they've always actually believed. And I wouldn't necessarily say this about Dickerson specifically, but a lot of them actually talk as if they pay lip service to the idea that America is great in some abstract version of itself. But really, they think this country is morally evil. They think that its people are bad. And what that translates to, hilariously, is that they don't like democracy. It's like, oh, wait, the people want something we don't want. It must be the children who are wrong. And I think that'll probably be the like ultimate line.
Well, it's like women who are always trying to get their husbands to lose weight, stop watching so much football, change their outfit, get a better job. I love you, but I really love what you could be. This is what Hillary Clinton said. I love America for, its potential, for what America could be. Or Michelle Obama talking about how she's always proud of her country when it supports her, and then she's ashamed for her country when it doesn't support her or her husband. Yeah, it's this idea that people who love humanity but can't stand other people.
Yeah,
they love their own conception of America, but it's not even that. They do hate democracy, but they actually hate America. And I kind of feel like that's what a lot of what this election was about. It was between the people who love America and the people who hate America. You can't say, I love America and I love all the future Americans who don't live here. And those are the ones that we have to worry about. And the ones who are here suck. And we're seeing this, like Martina Navratilova. I mean, there's tons of tweets exactly like what you were just describing. Martina Navratilova is like, well, I guess it's not surprising that a country that started out as a racist patriarchy behaves like a racist patriarchy. It's like, so leave, go back to Czech. I mean, who's asking you? You've made millions of dollars. You're like this, like queen of everything here. And like, what is your complaint? You're seeing tons of this. Like, I am so disappointed in America. This country is a failure. Well, it's just, sometimes you just have to love the country you're given. It's like your family. You might not like every member of your family. You may not like all of their characteristics, but love it or leave it, right? I mean, that's what they
If you can't be with the one you love, honey, love the one you're with. That's 100%. Yeah.
I know that we typically at the Claremont Institute are not exactly fans of Rousseau, but he has a great quote. A philosopher loves a Tartar so as to be spared having to love his neighbors. So this is the whole concept that we're talking about. And this is really like these, whatever you want to call them, globalists, whatever. I mean, this is a real problem fundamentally deep into their souls, that they do not fundamentally like this country. They like some liberal kind of abstract version of it. And especially, too, it's kind of ironic coming up on the 250th, anniversary celebration. We now have Trump. It's going to be amazing, right? Like, look at what he did July 4th in front of Mount Rushmore. I mean, this is who we have. We could have had the 1619 250th anniversary. Instead, we actually have a guy who, he actually loves America. Even go back to the early progressives. Like, say what you want about Woodrow Wilson, about, TR or whatever. At the end of the day, those guys absolutely loved America. Like you cannot say that they did not. And then compare them to the left today. They would repudiate, their anti-patriotism so quickly. It would make your head spin. So that's a real problem. And it's just so deep-seated, so ingrained through decades of university, through CRT, through all kind of sources and methods that you really ask them fundamentally deep down and they would have to admit, no, I really actually don't like this country. It's never lived up to what I want and it's never going to. I mean, it hasn't in how many, hundreds and hundreds of years. Why would you think it would, in the next 20? So that's a huge issue.
Yeah. You're making me think of one of the few actually interesting and insightful introspection pieces that I've found as I've been mostly just trolling the leftist websites that I like so that I can read the meltdowns. But every now and then you come across somebody that doesn't actually fit into this mold. And that's the case with this piece by Anna Rollins at Slate about those ads, which basically appealed to women that they could vote in private and keep secret from their oppressive husbands. And Rollins basically just says, like, this is, that is not a person. This is a fundamental misunderstanding of the actual people that you are talking to, and you're campaigning to an imaginary world. Like, whether you like it or not, most Republican women are fulfilled, self-aware, like totally in control of their personal politics. Like, and I'm sure that nobody will listen to that sort of talk, but I wonder whether some people who are saying those sorts of things will actually continue the center liberal shift rightward, which has been a major part of this too. Is like, are we going to start to see more and more, as they say, permission structure for people to jump ship?
Let me ask you, look at all the married couples or the marriages you're in, and which is more likely, that women are scared to tell their husbands who they're voting for, or husbands are afraid to tell their wives who they're voting for?
They had it exactly wrong.
Oh man,
it's all the scared secret Trump voters who fib to their wives that, oh yeah, I did the right thing, honey.
So what is going to happen with like the Bulwark, the Dispatch, the Liz Cheneys, all the Never Trump? Where do those guys go? I mean, they're just like a cynical grift anyway. But can they keep this up?
Some of them come by it honestly. I mean, I cannot explain. Did you guys watch? Did you see the clip of the Bulwark Group podcast where they were covering live coverage.
Yeah.
I mean, someone like Jonathan Last, I can't explain his actions in recent years by anything other than a kind of Trump-induced insanity. I mean, he ended towards the whenever it was on the Bulwark thing, when it finally it became apparent that Trump was going to win. I mean, Jonathan Last said the Biden administration should have been more extreme to save all of us from Trump. They should have made Puerto Rico a state. They should have made DC a state. They should have packed the Supreme Court. It's like he went full TR in the Bull Moose range on court stuff is really an insult to TR. I mean, he went crazy. I mean, he's running to he's not just now a moderate Democrat like maybe Bill Kristol is, but he's running to the extreme left wing of the party quickly. And to predict that of Jonathan Last 10 years ago, I would have said you were crazy. So I don't know how to explain it other than just I think it's this you look at a lot of the coverage of Trump's rhetoric, or some of it pulled out of context, but it's this persistent inability of the never Trump right. That's not even fair. The never Trumpers, you don't call them right anymore, really, and many other liberals, to separate signal from noise with Trump. His rhetoric is kind of carnival barky, and it's just not how he governs. And so a lot of us who observed 2016 through 2020 and observed a lot of the policies and promises kept and all the rest versus Trump's public persona, I mean, they're just two different things. And that seems to be how he works. It just seems disingenuous to me, or just a misperception of reality, to think that some of Trump's wilder fancies out on the campaign trail or out in public over the last 2 or 3 years is somehow his governing agenda. It's clear that that's not the case.
I guess, you guys, while we're recording this, Kamala Harris is giving her concession speech. I am seeing some reports from it, which is interesting and germane to what we're talking about. The kind of reactions I'm seeing are that that her concession speech might in fact be her finest hour, which is a low bar to clear, but she seems to basically be doing so with some grace. I like Michael Knowles tweeted, like, it's easy for her to be gracious because she had no business being the candidate in the first place. So after that, it's all gravy. But I guess, it's interesting. I just saw this line from her speech. I know many people feel like we are entering a dark time. If it is, let us fill the sky with the light of a brilliant billion stars, the light of optimism, of faith, of truth, and service. Now, I mean, self-aggrandizing, yes. Pompous, yes. Dramatic, yes, absolutely. But not burn the place down. So it's interesting. I was sort of wondering if she was going to come out and say, like, resist. So she doesn't seem to have done that. That's all I have to say. Just an update, a live update. And I guess after we'll all go and see what she said in full.
So in any way, I mean, kind of like a C grade version of like Amanda Gorman. Unobtrusive. I mean, kind of surprising and, sloppy prose, whatever. But yeah, I mean, this is not some like pink haired hat lady, going up there, saying burn everything down. So, we'll give her that. I mean, low bar.
We will concede we need the seed of truth to reign when we concede. Yes, that's basically the Amanda Gorman is going to come in.
I think it's going to be hard for them to completely put all the blame on Kamala Harris, given like demographically who she is. You're going to see people like Whoopi Goldberg. I do think Tim Walz is going to his reputation is going to be, I think they're going to put a lot of the blame on him, maybe, as because they positioned him as though he were like this exemplar of like positive masculinity. This like war hero, Super Bowl winning coach who nevertheless was very pro LGBT. But so maybe they'll put all the blame on him. I don't know. I mean, honestly, Randy Weingarten is to blame for all of this on a certain level, because she's the one who nixed Josh Shapiro as the.
Oh, is that true, Seth?
I think so, because Josh Shapiro was like, his school choice. He was like, right. He was weak on the teachers union, and those people are so resentful, and They refused to forgive. And yeah, I think that she pushed for Walz as like just a completely pliable teachers union type person. And it's hard, I know this is like, armchair quarterbacking, but doesn't it really, it's hard to imagine Josh Shapiro would have lent a certain degree of gravity to that ticket and probably would have helped a lot in Pennsylvania. I don't know. I mean, who can say?
Be looking at what we're looking at now, probably, but I don't. And I think that the Vance-Walz debate was a significant, a minor but significant point in the race. Somebody said last night, I forget who on the Daily Wire stream, said like that if you watch Trump's trajectory, it sort of peaks at the assassination attempt in the debate and then starts to go downhill when they roll Kamala out, and then continues to go downhill with his debate where he really does not perform well. And then actually there's like an inflection point kind of at that nadir. You have that vice presidential debate where we all thought, I think, that Walz really whiffed it, and Vance kind of announced himself, not just as a smart and interesting guy that, we agree with on a lot of stuff, but genuinely a top-notch politician and prospect for the future. So it's not so much necessarily Walz as the combination of the two of them that might have played a major role.
Yeah. Ironically enough, it turns out Walz is kind of the weird one, though.
Oh my God. Well, this was an important feature. I don't know why I can't quite put my finger on what this is, but there was something really creepy, almost horror movie about all the Joy stuff, because it was like the kind of vampire that tries to come and steal your essence, but he can only like suck it out as this weird lifeblood. And like the Joy thing and the weird stuff and the brat stuff, it looked on the face of it like just, oh yeah, we have all the celebrity and all the youth, and so we're just going to lean into that because it's one of our natural assets. But I don't think that's what it was. I actually think it was a calculated move to try to steal one of Trump's natural assets. It's like, we're going to take Superman's powers away from him and use them for Lex Luthor's project. And it was very like, obviously very astroturfed, and it turned out totally insincere, but it was also an attempt to get some of that energy that he has when he like dances to the YMCA song and put that into what is now a totally played out Democrat celebrity model. And yeah, it was everything they said about him and that stage, that that he was weird, that he was irrelevant, that he was bad at like media. There's just sort of projection.
Yeah, and that J.D. Vance was somehow like a creepy, weird, perverted uncle type.
Do you remember they said he f***ed a couch?
Yeah, that was obviously like describing Tim Walz. Like everything was just projection, and this is like, and it obviously didn't. I mean, you can't force other people to accept your projections. I mean, they have their own experience of reality.
Yeah, we're all busy with our own projections. I mean,
yes, yes, exactly.
We're occupied with our own psychological neuroses. You can't give us yours.
I want to, we could talk maybe a little bit about who got hardest hit a little on the sidelines or slightly off stage by this whole debacle. I mean, I was celebrating on Twitter that Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama both are going to take serious reputational hits for her role in displacing Biden. Whatever, maybe Biden would have done just as bad. Probably he would have. But I mean, she sort of spent a lot of political capital to make that happen in kind of a behind the scenes ugly way. And Obama, with his closing week and a half, same old hectoring former commander in chief. I'm going to make this a popular thing. The greatest demagogue in American politics in half a century, Barack Obama. Part of his closing argument after scolding black men and calling them sexist for maybe not wanting to vote for Harris. And then, a week later, in the last few days, saying maybe it was 2 days ago, on the stump, wherever he was, repeating the very fine people on both sides thing and just lying through his teeth about who Trump is. So, and then the other thing too, that's notable. I mean, this was clear kind of in 2016 as well, but they just reran the same playbook, which is the scolding, hectoring, like montage of celebrities telling us we can save democracy and I kind of twin them with the mainstream media. I mean, most of the American public just don't care and don't pay attention to these people anymore. So, the kind of oldie but goodie tour of Harrison Ford out on the campaign trail for Harris and Beyonce and, Cardi B. I mean, there's a big generational gap there, of course, between Harrison Ford and Cardi B, but, or maybe not. I don't want to slander Cardi B. It might not have been Cardi B. But anyway,
I always get her confused with Nicki Minaj, and one of them is sort of weirdly sympathetic to Trump.
Right wing. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
And it's definitely Nicki Minaj, I think.
So what do you guys think should be like the top like agenda items, first 100-day type stuff? What do you think what do you think they should really focus on?
Yeah, I think right out of the gate, it's got to be the border through executive orders, through Congress. You've got Mike Johnson in the House, maybe John Cornyn in the Senate. I'm not sure. But so, Texas. But yeah, I think it's got to be the border right out of the gate.
In a way, I don't want them to make the mistake that they made early in the Trump administration of pursuing the kind of nerd dream stuff of conservatism over the really visceral populist stuff that's also actually quite conservative. Now, the analog isn't perfect, so I would start with immigration and the border and e-verify. I mean, if you could get a comprehensive immigration bill, our version of it, through, get control of the border, get a real e-verify system going finally, and start deporting the worst of them and sort of slowly taking chunks out of the rest of this illegal population, that should be great. And then in the meantime, with executive orders, you can go after the administrative state and then prep the ground for what you really need to get control of the bureaucracy, which would be legislation. I can't imagine they're going to start with anything but the immigration problem. First of all, because it's such an acute crisis. Despite, I mean, I remember it seems that this big caravan started moving from Mexico on election day, yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think they're going to deal with that immediately. They're going to have to. Other than that, I mean, look, it depends on how we interpret Trump's instincts and the mechanics of the people around him advising him on the tariff question. I mean, his 20% across the board tariff, I've always interpreted, and one of his main spokespeople, one of those former investment bankers, I'm forgetting his name right now, has been touting it. He's like, no, it's a negotiating tactic. Like, we're going to finally, you impose a tariff on Europe, and in order to finally get American-made cars sold in Europe, which right now they are not, and that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, trade, immigration, and foreign policy should be the main things, with a very Claremont attack on the administrative state. That would be what I'd run with.
Totally. And it's so funny what you say about the tariffs is like the Democrats, they have this resistance to winning, or they feel like it's an embarrassment to put your enemies in a bad position. Like the way they can't, like Biden couldn't stand it when Israel was like, okay, we're taking out Hezbollah. It's like, well, maybe do you really want to do that? Isn't that kind of like, yeah, I mean, I think, I agree totally about immigration. I think Trump is going to make good on his promise. And I think this is totally doable to like end the war in Gaza and to end the war in Ukraine and to put Iran back in its place. For some reason, I mean, we see it in the Biden-Obama administration, this crazy thing with all of these Iranian spies running around. And look, isolate Iran, tell Bibi to like wrap it up, and tell Zelensky that he's going to get cut off and that they've just got to come to some kind of deal. These things are all like completely obvious. And I don't know what he'll do about China, but he seems to be able to deal with these people. It's only complicated if your goal is really to prolong wars, which is what the Democrats are doing.
Yeah, insofar as they have like a cogent objective, an identifiable objective that isn't just, wrapped up in their crazy. You're right. There's so much low-hanging fruit. And
right,
as Ryan said, the border is an actual urgent issue. It's not just like, oh, this is the thing we care most about. It's like, this needs to get fixed yesterday. Can we start now? And it does seem like, God willing, he'll have a lot of legislative support. He's got the Senate. Will he have the House? Probably. He's got this popular vote mandate, potentially. All this still to be confirmed. But there's just a lot of stuff you can do if he's disciplined about it and if he's learned from term one. So I agree with basically everything you guys have said and would co-sign it. The one thing I would add, and this is far from a top line item, but it would be a nice morale boost in the first 100 days, is I would like to revisit the whole sculpture garden of American heroes thing and the Make America Beautiful Again dimension of the Trump campaign, because it sort of came in at the 11th hour, a little too late, as a reactive defense against what was already sweeping the country, namely the 1619 riots. And now, I mean, one of the things that I'm most excited about is that this election really does look like a conclusive repudiation of 1619 as an ideology. And it would be awesome. Trump is going to preside over, I can't believe I'm saying this. I'm so excited even just to say these words. Trump is going to preside over the 250th anniversary of the country's founding. It's going to be Donald Trump and not Kamala Harris, who is president in 2026 when that happens. And we should all be so stoked about that. And I would really love to get a little bit kind of the groundwork laid where we're like, the classical architecture stuff. I think JD Vance, this would be a great project for JD Vance, actually, among other things. I'm going to put in a little bid for the culture side in the first 100 days.
And I want to, you feel like it could be an inflection point in American political history. So I would want to celebrate 250 years, both retrospectively and prospectively. I forget if I mentioned this on here or not, but like the image that would capture it would be George Washington astride a SpaceX rocket, like on its way to Mars.
100%.
That's great.
110%. Yeah, digital stuff. We haven't talked about that so much yet. This might not be first 100 days thing, but this is an Elon project, clearly, along with the bureaucracy and the space stuff. Is like, I mean, we haven't mentioned Mark Zuckerberg. We haven't talked about Tim Cook. We haven't talked about all of the tech CEOs that have been just kind of edging, like shyly, sort of coyly making their way in the Trump direction, preparing the ground. Elon led the way, and then they all kind of said, Zuck's got that broccoli haircut now.
Yes, the Beastie Boys version of Zuck.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, so there's so much that can be done, I think, with industry and with the kind of cleaning house on, or taking a serious look, I guess, at the Section 230 debates that we've been having and how to preserve free speech online in a robust way and so on and so forth. That's got to be an important agenda item. And Elon is a great person to do it.
Yeah, it's that would be part of the goosing the economic engine part of it, which would partly be cutting regulation and unleashing innovation, but also, and David Sachs on the All In podcast with his partners has been talking about this, about what to do about the kind of media oligopoly, not only in sort of the tech world and YouTube and Meta and all that, but also in broadcast media. Not revoking their licenses or anything, but start auctioning off the public spectrum instead of just giving it away to the old legacy institutions. And you're both doing good for the country and the competition for influence on the public debate, as well as creating some revenue for the government.
Yeah, I'm curious to see. I mean, of course, they say that this stuff starts now and not on Inauguration Day because there's so much he can get done, especially knowing. I don't know. I feel like we'll know a great deal by the end of the week about some of the unanswered questions. I'm so glad. And now I'm just sort of like basking and luxuriating in all the good parts of this. But like, I'm so glad that we don't have to do election month like we did last time. And it really does seem to have been too like conclusive a victory for that even to be on the table in the swing states. If he wins the popular vote, it'll be total gravy. And Ryan, you've been saying for a while, like, we obviously, have strong opinions about who should win, but the main, even before that, we want as a conclusive result one way or another and a peaceful transfer of power. And we did get that.
This was my best case scenario because my nightmare was waiting till Friday or next Monday to figure out who won. Somebody winning very narrowly, and if it got dragged out that long, the narrow win would, of course, be Kamala's. Just given how this movie has played out before, maybe we're being too deterministic, but I don't think so.
Yeah, I want the Electoral College to go back to just being a formality. You know what I mean? Like where we didn't have to like worry about, oh, okay, well, the slate is coming in and oh, it's November 6th and that's the date that this happens. And then this, all that stuff. I liked it in the old days when it just.
I want a new Carter Baker commission on U.S. elections with the goal of getting us back to, I mean, look, if you win decisively enough, it is overnight of, but we all know from 2020, not necessarily, but we need to somehow get ourselves back to however we do it. I mean, I'd be in favor of a national holiday for voting. That's fine. As long as we can find voting to mostly in person, maybe early voting for a week. That's fine. They do that in Florida. It's worked just fine. Or 2 weeks even. That's fine. But getting ourselves to where the rest of the industrialized West is, which is you vote on one day and then you find out at the end of the day who won. You have a couple speeches and everyone's done. It's just, I mean, even Brazil can do it.
Do you think this is constitutional amendment material, Ryan? This stuff?
It's not clear how much Congress can do, although constitutionally it's suggested that they can do a lot. So I don't know that you need an amendment, but you're right, Spencer. What's standing in the way of this is the fact that it's the blessing and the curse of our very decentralized elections. Blessing because it turns out that kind of manipulating low propensity voters and mailing stuff in for them and not requiring ID is a big hole in our system, and that's probably where some of the fraud comes from. It's not really that manipulable on a grand scale from the outside because it's so decentralized. But that means that you have, Pennsylvania may take 4 days. California will be counting for 3 weeks.
Who do you think's going to win that state? Yeah. No, well, I mean, I'm sort of thinking of on the analogy of like murder laws. They're actually adjudicated at the state level, but there's obviously sort of a set of parameters that the Constitution allows, and you couldn't just legalize murder in a state. I wonder if you could say like, okay, you're going to run, each state's going to run this, but this is going to be the results. Like you are going to work it out how you want, but you're going to have an answer by this time or something.
No, I think you could handle it without an amendment.
Well, they seem to have worked it. I mean, the state like Pennsylvania, Georgia got its act together. I mean, most of these states seem to have.
Yeah, voter ID requirement passed in Nevada, which is great news. Even though Trump won it, remains one of these states with a heavily driven outcome by their big county around Vegas, Clark County, where the unions are in control of it. So there's all sorts of incentives for chicanery. But requiring ID to vote ameliorates that significantly. Well, all right, gents, we've hit our hour. This was fun. So I want to thank everyone for once again listening to the Roundtable. Rate us well wherever you get your podcasts. Check out all of Claremont's work at claremont.org. If you'd like to support us, go to claremont.org/donate. Go to the American Mind at americanmind.org, Claremont Review Books at claremontreviewbooks.com, and check out our latest work in DC at dc.claremont.org, and actually a lot of work around the States. Thanks to our engineering and production crew, the brothers Gannon, as Spencer called them last time. And thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.